Welcome back to the Mighty Merp podcast, where we go beyond the courtroom to explore people, passions, and purpose behind the practice of law. I'm your host, Melissa Rosenblum, also known as Mighty Merp, and today I'm excited to welcome Maritza Rodriguez, a highly respected family law attorney, key figure in the New Jersey State Bar Association's Putting Lawyers First initiative, and a member of the New Jersey Supreme Court Committee on Wellness in the Legal Profession. For the last 2 years, Maritza has been helping to shape statewide conversations around lawyer wellness, focusing on mental health, burnout, and the future of well-being in our profession. Today, we'll talk about her journey from where she grew up to what inspired her to pursue law to the credible work she's leading now. And we will ask the big questions. Now that we've talked about lawyer burnout and mental health, what's next? Welcome.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for inviting me. This is going to be fun, I'm sure.
I'm excited to have the conversation as well. So thank you for coming on to Mighty Merp. And I think you are the first guest of the fall. So welcome.
Awesome. Especially today on Halloween.
Halloween. It's a beautiful day. It's a Friday, which also makes it like amazing end of the week.
Yeah. No, for sure.
So I always like to start with guest origin stories, which is tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, your family. Are you a New Jersey born and raised girl? Are you a transplant? Tell me about you.
Yeah, sure. So I am from New Jersey, born and raised. I was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, and I lived in Newark. I went to Rutgers College for undergrad, and I majored in comparative literature. And I also then from college, I worked for about 10 years. And so I worked in various jobs. I worked for publishing companies. I also worked in politics, political campaigns for various candidates starting from presidential campaigns to governor's races. And so I did that for a decade, those different kinds of jobs. And then I applied to law school during my last job and I got in. And so I enrolled as an evening student at Rutgers Newark Law School.
I was going to ask, was that at Rutgers too? Your
Yes.
Rutgers undergrad, Rutgers Law School. I always like to ask, did you always have an inclination or thought? I know you're a second career lawyer, which may seem like you might not have thought about law school when you were young, but did you think about being a lawyer when you were growing up?
I think it was definitely an idea in the back of my mind that I had, but I honestly, I was first generation college student and I didn't really know any lawyers until, working in my career after college. So as I got to meet them, it's really when I considered that it could be possible. Like it could be possible. I
Is
just
it
didn't
because
think.
you met lawyers or politicians or both? Did you think, like, what was it about meeting individuals that you thought, I could do this?
Well, it was the office I was working in. So I was working in the Department of the Public Advocate. And the public advocate at that time was Ronald Chen. And he's a, constitutional law scholar, former dean of a law school, of Rutgers Law School. And just being alongside him, just talking to him every day, now I realize it felt like what was the equivalent of being in a law school classroom every single day. At the time, I didn't realize it. I just thought this is like, wow, this is incredible work. I'm just learning so much. I'm learning about policy, about public interests, and I want to be a part of it. So that's really when I said, I could do a lot more if I go back to school.
Yeah. So you went back as an evening student. You might be my first guest, and this is season 5, I think, of the Mighty Merp podcast, who said they went to law school as an evening student. And so if you could talk about that in the sense of you were working full time or at least part time during the day and kind of how balancing that, because I know what law school was without a job. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a part-time job and a husband, but I did not have a full-time job. So I can only imagine.
Yeah. So law school in your 30s, you're working full time. So I was working a full time job. I was working for the public defender's office. I was an investigator and an
Okay.
attorney, eventually attorney assistant. And I was working, getting up at 6 in the morning, working from like 8 to 4:35, then leaving to go to law school. And my classes were from 6 to 10, Monday through Thursday, and then just spending Friday, Saturday, and Sunday doing homework and everything else and every errand that you didn't get to do during the week. And, rinse, repeat. That's the same cycle for 4 years. And so it's definitely hard. I miss it sometimes because you learn to be very, very disciplined. You don't have time to not be. And, the folks that you meet in the evening program are some of the most incredible people there are. They make up my best friends now. And, I don't think I would have ever met them in any other circle of life had we not all decided to go to law school and go at night.
Well, that first year, whether it's night or day, is a little bit like boot camp. And so I think your first semester law school friends really
Yeah.
become friends for life. But as I said, the one thing you know about people that are going at night is they're really focused and committed to wanting to become a lawyer and wanting to be, I'll say, effective and good at being a lawyer. You're choosing,
Yeah.
to go at night while you're working a full-time job. It takes an extra year to complete. It's a commitment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're choosing to give up, every 6 to 10 p.m. for the next 4 years. And that's a big chunk of time when you think about it. So it is, it definitely requires a commitment, a very big commitment to want to do that very early on.
So when you graduated, did you join the office of the public defender?
No, I did not actually. Took a leave of absence once I graduated to just study for the bar. And I decided I had two options, whether one was an offer to go work in state government in another position, and another one was to do a clerkship. And so I was kind of torn. On the one hand, I had already worked in state government, and I knew it could probably be an easier path, and I would certainly have made more money initially. But I realized that if I chose the clerkship, it would definitely put me on the path to possibly doing litigation and working at a firm, which is something that I really was interested in doing and is certainly something I ended up doing. So I chose the clerkship, and I'm really glad I did because it just put me on the path that I am now. So here I am.
That's great. Um, so you ended up choosing family law, um, which is a very specific field. I say this all the time is that we all graduate and we could all choose different areas of law, but once you're practicing, I'm about to hit 30 years of practicing, and I only have done criminal law. So if you ask me, criminal law and domestic violence cases, which I do think overlap,
Yeah.
but if you ask me about a divorce, anything about the details of filing for a divorce or any questions, I'm like, nope, nope, can't help you. Civil case, slip and fall in the casinos, I'm not your person. I will refer you out. What do you think about, I guess, the few questions I would have regarding picking an area of law? Did you pick family law or did family law pick you? Because sometimes that happens.
So I think it was a little bit of both, right? So I do international family law as well. And I think that's what ended up picking me. So, in law school, you get access to these incredible technology and tools. So you get access to Lexis and Westlaw. And so I spent a lot of time on them. And I don't remember whether it was for a class or not, but I actually ended up doing a lot of research on international child abduction cases. For some reason, I really can't even remember why, but I did spend an inordinate amount of time on that. I learned the area. So once I did my clerkship, it was 2012 once I was done, and the economy was like not great, right? So the job offers were out there, but they were for jobs that I really was not interested
Mhm.
in areas I was not interested in. And because this is actually like a third career for me, I really was being very picky. So I wanted to end up in a boutique law firm like that did family law because I was interested in it. And so to me, if it wasn't that, then I didn't want to do it. But the offers were just not there. Right. And I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any family connections. I certainly did not have those kind of incredible resources to probably lean on at that moment. And so I decided that, you know what else? My goal had been, I'm going to go work for a family law firm. I'm going to learn
Mhm.
everything I can from them, and then I'm going to leave them. And I'm going to start my own practice. And so because I didn't have that firm to go to, I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to have to start my own practice. So I started my own practice. And then a good friend of mine approached me and he said, hey, I think I have like a custody referral for you. And I was like, sure, I've seen these all the time as a law clerk. This should be good, and it should be easy, a good case to start. And so they
Famous
reached
last words, right? This will
back.
be easy.
So she consulted with me, and it turns out it's an international child abduction case, and it's in federal court. And she has a trial that's scheduled for 3 weeks from that day
Oh
that I
my
consulted
goodness.
with her. And so in law school, I had spent a lot of time also participating in mock trial competitions. So by my last year, I had competed for the school in their Baker trial or mock trial competition. We had placed second, and and by then I had already done like 4 or 5 competitions. So I was pretty comfortable on my feet. The trial part is what actually sounded very exciting, and the fact that it was 3 weeks out sounded like, it would be a little crazy, but doable. But the part that was most nerve wracking to me was, how do I file something online?
Mhm.
What does my cover letter say? I have to get this Pacer account. I don't know how to do that. Apparently, you had to take a test. So studying for that felt like the bar, and so all these things. So that I took the case, and I ended up doing my first case ever. My first trial ever ended up in federal court. So,
That's amazing. It's
and so
amazing, but
yeah,
go
it
ahead.
was it was crazy too because I had never worked at a firm. I actually didn't even know who my opposing counsel was. So to me, they was like, "Oh, they have a cute logo there, maybe another solo like me or something." Oh my God, I just blanked on who the name was, but I'll think of it. But it's actually a very large firm, and I didn't know that until
Isn't it good what you don't know though? Like, so what I think is so interesting is that, you know, we go to law school and we learn how to think like a lawyer, but we're not really taught how to run a law firm, how to do the practical aspects of filing, of how do you file something? How do you enter an appearance? So many of simple things that I jokingly say that now if I didn't have a staff, because they're able to do everything. But when you're starting out, when I hung my own shingle, I really, I had a part-time person and I was doing it all. And they don't teach you that at law school. So it's funny that that was some of the levels of stress, that it wasn't even necessarily the case,
no,
but
no, it wasn't. And you're so right. Those are the things that that was so nerve wracking. I still remember to this day, having to figure out how to file it, what to say in my cover letter, like just really silly things, right? Like,
right. Is the verbiage in the cover letter exactly what needs to be said to enter the appearance,
yeah,
which is the least of the concern of the case?
the least.
So, and how lucky for you, what wisdom, like you said, it was your third career, that you knew what you wanted and you stayed that path without being stressed about taking a job. Because my friends from law school who settled on a job, but not the area of law that they wanted, they're the ones that don't love being lawyers. The ones that love being lawyers are the ones that found or knew what they wanted and pursued it and are in the area of law. I knew I wanted criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I wanted prosecuting, but within 6 months of law school, I knew. it was criminal defense work. And I still love being a lawyer. So I think that that's the advice that I tell people. And I say to young lawyers, if they're in an area of law that they don't love after a year, switch now, switch before you get stuck, before you can no longer, you know, change the type of law that you're practicing.
No, I think that's 100% correct. And for me, it was about being intentional, right? And so ever since college, too, I mean, I picked a major that was like 12 people were in my major, right? It was comparative literature, right? It was not screaming practical major, right? It was screaming something I wanted because I really loved reading and I loved just learning about all these different cultures and books and time periods and history. How was that going to translate into a job that was going to help me? So I realized that I had to find a way to make it practical. So that's always been my approach. And so I spent all of college also working in a computer lab, right? And so when Microsoft was coming out with all of their technology, I was learning it and teaching it. So I was balancing doing something I love with also something that is practical. So if I knew I wanted to end up litigating when I was in law school, so I knew I had to work on the skills that were going to make that easier. So that's why I did a lot of mock trial competitions. I did
Hmm.
anything that I thought were going to help those kind of skills.
Yeah. Yeah. It unfortunately sometimes people go to law school with not quite knowing. And when people ask me about law school, I say, if you know what you want to do, if you know why you want to go to law school, go to law school. It's an amazing education. I love law school. I wish I could go back and be a student all the time. And I say that as someone who's taught law school classes. I'd rather be the student. So, all right, we're going to switch gears now. You are very involved in this New Jersey State Bar Association. Did someone tell you that that was something important to do when you were in law school? Or how did you get involved with the State Bar to begin with?
So I got involved with the state bar, I think from my first day in law school, because I remember vividly, it was Peggy Sheehan Nee. She was the president at that time, but she also ended up being my trust and estates professor. And she talked to us about the bar associations. I also was a member of the Hispanic Bar Association of New Jersey and the National Hispanic Bar Association of New Jersey. And so, they were always having events to talk to students, going to their conferences. And so I realized early on the importance of bar associations. So I remained active. And so I also then participated in once I was a solo, I participated in their leadership academy
Hmm.
and just remaining involved in different sections. And so eventually led to, getting involved with more sections and more projects and now currently a state bar trustee.
So you were very involved in the Putting Lawyers First initiative, which, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, I know the results came out during the presidency of Geraldine Lawrence. And I know you were a key figure in that initiative. So how did you first become involved in that effort? Was it something that was being discussed way before the questionnaires went out and before there was the publication of what the results were? Or if you could even share with me what the Putting Lawyers First initiative is.
Yeah, so putting lawyers first was an initiative that Geraldine was designing for her presidency in terms of addressing issues that are either standing in the way of lawyers being able to serve their clients, but also standing in the way of them being able to really fully function in a way that isn't leaving them burnt out or stressed or incredibly depressed. I mean, we have all of these high rates that we now know, but it started actually the I want to say the March before, a few months before she became president at the May conference in Atlantic City. And we were at a conference for the family lawyer retreat and we were walking on the beach together. I said, let's take a walk. Or she said, let's take a walk. And so we were
Uh-huh.
walking and I said, listen, I've got a pitch for you. And I said, we need to do a survey of the lawyers in New Jersey. And at that point, I had been very much involved in a lot of different lawyer well-being initiatives. So I said we should do a survey for lawyers in our state to kind of just gauge where we're at. And I think that could help us make the case for other initiatives afterwards. And we knew that the math and the results would end up where they did, and across the board in the US.
Well, it's sort of that we know that lawyers are burnt out. We know that as a profession, lots of us are type A personalities and we put too much on our plate. And there's a high level of stress because we're dealing with other people's problems.
Yeah. So
You know,
I made the pitch for that. And then I also said, and here's another issue that we should take on. And this is low hanging fruit. And she always bothers me about that low hanging fruit quote because she says it was so not low hanging fruit because it ended up being a battle. But we did do really well with it, was tackling the 12B question. So it's the question.
sorry.
Oh, no, no worries. It's the question on the attorney and the application to be certified for and admitted. So it's the question that asked if you had at any, actually
You're going to pull it up.
no, I have to reword that because I don't remember what the wording, how it is. So I apologize for that. Here it is. Yes, it basically was asking you if you had any mental health conditions and to disclose if you were in treatment. And if you did, then that essentially kind of marked a red flag in your application for admission. And so basically for in the committee on character and fitness. And so we wanted
To become a lawyer, just so sorry, I sometimes like to talk to everyone like they're in sixth grade, just in case they don't know that lawyers have to go through a character and fitness as well.
yeah.
I try to direct the conversation so Tom can understand.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So we wanted to look at that question and whether we could, make a push for that question to be removed because across the states, across the United States, different states were removing it or modifying the question so that it wasn't necessary to disclose that because they found that it was actually standing in the way. Like sometimes students were putting off getting any mental health help because they didn't want to have to disclose it and they didn't want to have to risk that they would potentially not be admitted to practice.
Correct. And the question's a very outdated question compared to the society that we're living in today. And as a mom of kids that are in their 20s, and I have one that's still left in college, his position would be everyone has been diagnosed with something at this point, and everyone is on some sort of medication for it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's his position, whether it's ADHD or depression or anxiety, it's all in there, he says like every one of my friends has a diagnosis of something.
Yeah.
So it really is an antiquated question.
Yeah, no, and thankfully, the Supreme Court modified the question and to not require that disclosure if you're getting treatment. So it's a big push and it's definitely an improvement. So we're happy about that.
So you said it was low hanging fruit. How long did it take you to successfully complete the easy, let's remove the mental health question?
So we didn't get it removed. We got it modified, but it did take several months. But thankfully, the Supreme Court was really, really receptive. And they agreed that, the last thing that they wanted to see happen was the question stand in the way of someone getting treatment or stigmatize, getting treatment. So I think that it ended up with a good result. So it was worth it.
Yeah. So I love the fact that the two of you are walking on a beach having this conversation about mental health, because I think walking on a beach by the water is probably one of the most relaxing and such a positive thing to do for your mental health, because besides the exercise, just being by water, there's something amazingly relaxing about it. So you said that the Putting Lawyers First initiative, doing the survey, was confirming what you already knew. I always like to go back to the results of that survey because even though I think we all knew it, it is still astonishing the stats of high rates of alcohol, significant depression, lawyers who want to leave. If you recall or have any of those stats in front of you, what did the survey establish?
Yeah. So it said, I always like to start with the positive, right? That at least 51% still feel very enthusiastic about being a lawyer very often or always. And so that's still a good sign. But I do, it is still a little concerning that it's only that percentage, right? But 49% of lawyers, so almost half of the lawyers that
Right.
surveyed, and we surveyed about 1,600 lawyers, reported high levels of burnout. And so 56% of them reported a high prevalence of problem drinking. 68% reported feeling anxious in the last 2 weeks. 23 had a high prevalence of depressive symptoms. And almost half had strong feelings of isolation, right? And 28% considered leaving the profession altogether due to the stress and the burnout. And 10%, sadly, 10% had thoughts of suicide in the last 2 weeks. So the burnout was nearly 2 times the level of any other working population. So we're talking about doctors or engineers, any other profession. The suicidal rate was 3 times that of any other working population. And the drinking was 6 times worse.
So the drinking didn't surprise me at all
Yeah.
because I've been involved in both the local Atlantic County Bar Association as well as the State Bar Association. So I've seen lawyers get together and there is a lot of drinking. What were some of the findings that you were shocked about?
So I think that in particular, I've always been interested in how young lawyers are doing. I also am a professor, so I always am very curious as to, the effects of this profession on young lawyers, and young lawyers that were reported feeling 4 times as
Mhm.
depressed as any other the other respondents. So to me that was a little bit shocking. And they were also 6 times as likely, if they had been practicing 3 years or less, to report being that depressed. So the newer you were to this profession, the more in this area, at that time period, you were likely to report being depressed. So that was
I
something.
wonder if it's because they're so much more in tune with their feelings and emotions. Gen Xers, we just ignore them. We're fine. We're fine. We're fine. It's all fine. I wonder, I mean, I'm not saying that older attorneys aren't depressed. I'm just saying I wonder if we're less likely to report it or to actually recognize it.
So I think you're onto something. So I think very much Gen X, right? We grew up in our parents, or we remember hearing, especially even in our workplace environments, like, oh, I had to go through that, or it's just something you have to do. And it's not, it's not cool. Just because you have to deal with it or you dealt with it doesn't mean that we should keep doing it. Right.
Right.
And doesn't make it any less healthy or less toxic of an environment to be in if we're still having this behavior go on that's causing people this kind of stress.
I know. I have to tell you, my least favorite statement or sentiment is when people say, well, that's the way it's always been done. It almost makes me want to scream when I hear it because I
Yeah.
think it doesn't mean that it was right. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's the best practice. It doesn't mean anything other than almost a laziness of, well, we do this because we do it. Let's, you know, look
The
at the
other
why.
the other statistic that I thought was really interesting is that almost 75% of the lawyers reported working on the weekends. So, which
Yeah.
I'm not surprised about, right? And so that can also contribute to a high level of burnout, anxiety, depression.
Yeah. Yes. That doesn't surprise me. Actually surprises me the 50%, 51% a little. I mean, I guess I I know so many people. I know so many people who love being a lawyer. I know so many people that don't. But if you have two lawyers standing next to each other, Just think of it. Just 1 out of 2,
Yeah.
50%. Um, so as a result of putting lawyers first initiative in the survey and the study that came out after that, uh, we, or the Supreme Court, I will say, created the Wellness Committee.
Yes.
Could you share, was that always a goal or an intention
I think that, yeah,
as
the goal was always to see what, let's put some numbers to what is being experienced by the lawyers in this state. And then let's push forward to have some change happen, right? And address these issues because it's not okay. We have to, you know, these are our colleagues, right? And we want to have a healthy profession. A lot of us, especially those on the task force, we are really passionate about being lawyers. We want to be lawyers. I love being a lawyer, but it doesn't mean it's not a hard job to do and that there are not days where I ask myself, do I really love being a lawyer? But I want to see other people that are in this profession do well. So we wanted to see how we can address these issues.
right? So the New Jersey Supreme Court Committee on Wellness in the legal profession, I think was founded or established 2.5 years ago. It feels like longer, but I think it might only be 2.5 years, correct?
Yeah, it was shortly after the report, for sure.
And the goal of the committee is to address the burnout, the mental health issues, and see what we can do to change. And I think initially there was a lot about education.
Yeah. So there's a lot about education, a lot about, addressing the stigmas, also just addressing that this profession is leading to suicides, this profession is leading to high rates of alcoholism. And what do we do? How do we help our colleagues in this profession? So a lot of discussions around that, a lot of discussions with judges when they see that, how can they be supportive? So
Right, right. I mean, so I think the messaging has gotten out. I'm very optimistic about the fact that the messaging from the Wellness Committee, from the New Jersey State Bar, because it was initially much about raising awareness. So now I would say, now we understand the why, we understand sort of why lawyers fall into this pressures and burnout. My question is, what's next? What next steps do you think for the profession do we turn to have actual, not just awareness, but tangible, lasting change? What do we need to do?
yeah, so I think, we have the data, right? And so we've heard from a lot of people. So I think a lot of it is figuring out how do we alleviate some of this pressure? How do we make it easier for people to be able to practice so they don't feel like they, and not do it while suffering in silence and not
Mhm.
getting help. So, a lot of it is just really has been the result of a lot of conversations that we've had independently with lawyers or groups, whether they be the affinity bars or, just smaller groups that we listen to, discussions, candid discussions, and trying.
Has there been specific we need this or we need that when we're talking to these affinity groups or smaller group sessions?
Yeah, so a lot of them are feeling this like, right now there's just so much pressure coming from all these different directions, right? Everybody's like in
Mhm.
demand at all times, right? So we were, Zoom was great, but also Zoom was like it was the best thing and the worst thing that probably could have happened, right? The best thing
Yeah.
because it made things a lot so convenient for us to be able to practice, but it also made the demand on our time to be one that's always nonstop, right? And so
Right.
appearances as well and not being able to take time off, right?
So, and I will tell you the other negative. So and as somebody who uh, handles municipal court cases, so I am all over South Jersey in all these municipal courts, and having it online and Zoom is so much more convenient. And everything you said is accurate, but it also disconnects us from each other.
Yeah.
in a way that increases the isolation.
Yeah. Yeah. So finding ways to connect again, also finding ways to just give us some time off, like just not have these periods of time where you're always thinking that, like, no matter what, there's going to be some kind of court appearance. So some kind of pause. I think everybody needs it, whether it be the judges who are constantly hearing more cases than they is humanly possible 5 days a week
Mhm.
and possibly spending their weekends on a lot of these cases, to the attorneys who have an incredible amount of demands on their time from their clients, especially, their clients who are emailing at all hours of the day, expecting them to be present on the weekends. We already know that our attorneys are working, like 7 out of 10 of them are working on the weekends, right? And
Right.
so there's never any time off. So it's mainly an ask for things to slow down a bit. And so that, we're not burnt out, by February when it's only February.
Right. Well, the world we're living in with the immediacy of everything, you know, um, I started my law firm. So I was a partner at another law firm and we did everything with our phones. Like we had a staff, but clients were able to communicate and call us 24/7. And they did. And when I started my own law firm 7 years ago, as I became more established, I've created all these systems so that I am not accessible 20 clients,
Yeah. No, that's so important.
and
That is so important.
excuse me. Yeah, so I've had people comment to me, there's so much awareness now. There's so much, um, uh, things that you can do from a personal perspective, such as managing your calendar, turning your phone off, you know, making sure you walk or exercise and journal. What those are things that we can do individually. But I have had people straight out say, "What's next? What what is gonna change within the court?" And I agree with you that it's not just the lawyers, it's the judges, because I can't speak for, civil division, but in where my office is in the county that I work, I can tell you that the number of cases, and we have more judges now than we did 7 to 8 years ago, and we have doubled the caseload. They have doubled the caseload. I
Yeah.
mean, so their pressure, it's not just lawyers, it's judges too that have all that pressure. And, you know, I think that it's not really, I don't think just saying go for a run, which I do for my mental health, can solve the problem for everyone if
Yeah.
there's not changes in the system.
Especially for smaller firms too, sometimes solo practitioners like myself, small firms like yours, it's, sometimes having something happen to that lawyer or someone in their family puts them in a position where they cannot focus and they have to take a moment away to deal with that. And it's not as easy as if you're in a firm and you can say, hey, so and so, go run to court and cover. So trying to address the stress from those groups, I mean, that's the largest number of attorneys in our state are solo practitioners. So trying
Right.
to address the pain points that they're feeling and to address how to help them so that they don't have to jump through, 17 hoops when attention should be with their immediate attention should be with their family, especially if,
Hmm.
there is a time of need. This year alone, I had a colleague, I was in the middle of a case and my adversary died. And it was incredibly sad because I'm grateful that the conversations we did have, my last conversation in memory of him is actually a really, really pleasant one. And we were sitting and talking about the profession and we were complaining about, and we were having like a couple laughs about it. So I'm grateful to him for that memory. And, when it really did affect me, I mean, not as deeply as perhaps some people who were way closer to him, but it did affect me because it's still a colleague in this profession.
Right. And, and you were in the middle of the trial and there were issues with postponements as well, right?
There were, thankfully, the courts, were somewhat understanding, but it wasn't without its challenges. And I'm sure that, we only had one case in common, and that attorney had many cases.
Mhm.
So I don't know that, it went as smoothly as it did, with us, probably in other cases with other judges.
There is nothing worse as a lawyer, and I'm a trial attorney. I'm in court all the time. So I'm not in my office. I'm in court almost every day of the week. Today I was in Camden County and Atlantic County handling criminal matters. And there is nothing worse than when you have a crisis, such as death in the family or a child being hospitalized or something else. And I've had all of these things occur during my career. And then having in the courts for an adversary push back on any postponements
Yeah.
or not having an avenue to just ensure that those postponements are automatic. And it's hard for a small firm or solo because you have to contact all the individual courts and all the individual adversaries. And it really does increase the level of stress from, whatever you're dealing with on the personal level. It just, you know,
And how much you want to disclose, and if you're in a very an emotional state, it's a hard conversation to have. I mean, I remember that when my father passed, and it was somewhat unexpected, and so I had to act fast, and I had things pending, and I just it was very hard to kind of relive every conversation I had to have with every judge, and so
right.
it wasn't a pleasant experience. I wish that on no one.
No, I agree. I have another attorney who reached out to me who was suffering from some serious medical issues and needed a continuance, and there was a judge who denied it initially, and he wasn't as familiar with the judge, and he said, "I don't know what to do. My kids don't even know about the medical condition yet. Like, I'm still in the process. I haven't told my family. It's only my wife and I that know."
Mm,
And he said, "I can handle the case in about 3 months, but I can't do it right now. I'm not physically able to."
yeah.
And yeah, and I said, "You're gonna have to write it in a letter. Or to call and to have to divulge it because there's no other way." That's the problem, is there's no other way right now. And so, and again, the problem is that it intensifies the pressure and stress that we face anyway on any given day and in any case. So I do love some of the state bar programs or help that's available. Do you want to share any of that?
Yeah, so one of the member benefits is the ability to, I think it's Nectum and Associates is associated with the state bar. And as one of the benefits of your membership is that you are able to have up to 3 meetings or calls with a mental health provider that are free as part of your membership benefit. And if afterwards you still want to continue, they will find a way to either doing it on a sliding scale or find you someone that participates with your insurance. So I think that sometimes that's the hardest part, is trying to figure out how to get help or where to get help. So I think this is trying to make it a little easier for attorneys to just call.
For attorneys and family, right?
It's open to attorneys or anyone in your family. So yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's an amazing opportunity, or I will say resource, for people that don't know where to begin.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. How do you balance leadership, lawyering, committee work, family, personal life? How do you personally feel like you can maintain the balance and prevent burnout for you? And I know I'm assuming something here, that you yourself are not burned out, but you said you still love practicing, you still love doing what you're doing. So how do you maintain the balance with everything you do and being a leader in our community?
So I do experience burnout every now and then. I do a lot of domestic violence cases similar to you. So in those cases, they kind of work like where they're super intense because they're short cases. They happen very quickly. And so you work very intensely on them. in a short amount of period of time, and then they're done. And so, and then you go on to the next one, right? And so it's like a roller coaster, right? And so depending where you are with the case, depending what kind of case it is, you can internalize some of it, right? It's that vicarious trauma that goes on. And so depending the issues that you're dealing with as well. So I do experience burnout, and I have to be very, very aware of when I'm starting to experience that. So I have been leaning into a lot of creativity in the last couple of years. And
Oh,
so
nice.
I love reading. So I wake up every morning. I usually wake up at 5:30, and I go to the gym, and I just get on the treadmill with my Kindle, and I read for an hour. And so before I work out, so I just sometimes I can average a book a week if I'm super, super dedicated, and depending the book. But the other thing I like to do a lot is art. So I like to go to a lot of galleries and museums every week. So
Hmm.
and art is kind of an expression of mindfulness, right? And so whether you're looking at it online through a museum, or, my partner is an artist. So through him, I've been able to learn a lot more about art as well and appreciate it. So, when you're experiencing it, the beauty of it, or the awe, you're standing there learning about it, it kind of gives you a sense of expansion and connection that's beyond ourselves. So, neuroscience has shown that, that awe decreases that activity in our brain that's always on and on and on. It's always ruminating, right? Our thoughts are always on, like, what do I have to do next? What do I have to say next? And so it promotes this calm and this gratitude. And so that's a really helpful thing for me. And, when I do that during the week, it just kind of brings me down.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That's great. That's what running does for me. It makes me stop thinking enough and just focus on my breath. And my kids, I've been running for years, and my kids will say if I'm snappy or
you need to go
they can
run.
see it, they say, "When was the last time you ran? Go run." So it's nice to have that outlet. And we both talked that about teaching. So I'm going to ask you, what advice would you have for the young lawyers or even law students about protecting their mental health from the very start of their careers? Because I don't think we had that I know I didn't have it. I remember coming back from court from the Philly Public Defender's office and crying in my office more often than I would like to admit. And I'm not a crier at all. So, what advice would you give young lawyers or even law students today about
Yeah.
protecting their mental health?
Well, thankfully, it's part of an ongoing conversation. For the last 5 years, I've been teaching a class called Professionalism and Wellbeing. And so, at the law school, at Rutgers Law School, that's been open to Rutgers Camden as well. And so we spend all semester kind of thinking about the issues that come up when you're a lawyer, and how they deal with professionalism, but also how they deal with your well-being. And so to prepare you for this, right? Because we don't want them to go crying, when they get back from court, or like me suffering in silence, trying to figure out, well, what am I going to write in this cover letter? Like, knowing that that's the point where you can reach out, and where are the groups you can reach out to, right? And
Hmm.
so that they don't have to go through that. So I think some of the questions we have, and it goes back to your first point about being intentional about your career. Sometimes, an attorney said this, and Cedric, actually, that's right. He had an exercise where he said, if you could retire, and let's say you took 2 years off, right? And you had all your expenses paid, and you could do whatever you want, what would you do? Right. And so asking them, and trying to figure out, does what they'd want to do align with what they're doing now, or what they're on the path to do
Mm,
now, right? Because or thinking about, if they were writing their retirement speech, what would it say, and does it
hmm.
reflect the path that they're on now, right? So
Oh,
being really intentional and thinking about, like, what is your purpose in this life, and what is it, where are you going to leave your mark? And if you're just kind of just roaming now without a purpose or without a path, just bringing it back, because that will also take a toll on you. So
yeah.
thinking of
It,
intentionality.
it reminds me of knowing your why.
Yes. Yeah. And also practicing gratitude, right? We do it in our class, and we can see, like, in the first 8 weeks, it's really hard because as lawyers, we have a negativity bias. We're always, we're trained to see how everything could possibly go wrong. People consult with us, and our advice to them is always like, this is how this can possibly go wrong. And here is the worst case scenario, right?
Right.
And so, we're so programmed to think that way that it carries into our personal lives too, as well. And so we're always thinking of, like, how everything is not going to happen for us, how we're going to fail at something, or, instead of thinking of it as how, isn't it great that this thing happened? Or isn't it great that so-and-so called me? Or the good things that happen. And so when you practice gratitude, it kind of just helps switch your brain to help you get out of that.
Right. When I'm doing really well I don't really do full journals, but when I'm really intentional, I try to each week write the positive of the week professionally. I know what they are personally, but professionally, to remember even the little wins, which could be someone calling and asking me for advice and just being able to help. They don't have to be huge wins all the time. So, well, I've taken up 56 minutes of your time so far, so I appreciate our conversation so much. Looking ahead, what's your personal vision for the future of lawyer wellness? Do you have anything specific that you haven't said or you want to add?
I think that, really working on initiatives that are going to help our lawyers feel that there's not such this enormous pressure, that we do have their back, that the courts have their back, that the judges have their back too, and we have theirs too, right? Because the judges also are enormously overworked and stressed out and experiencing burnout too. And that's a conversation we don't really have too often. So I think more discussion, but certainly I think a lot more initiatives behind it.
Maritza, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for your leadership in the New Jersey State Bar Association and the legal community. For everyone listening, if you're feeling overwhelmed, remember, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. We can't pour from an empty cup. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
He's going to pop on now. Tom, I've been holding off eating the gummy bears.
One of the best ways to support Melissa and the Mighty Mert podcast is to go to our YouTube page, find the subscribe button, open the menu, and click the bell icon so you actually get alerts when we post new episodes or shorts. For any questions or interest in podcasting, go to legalpodcasting.com.